My relationship with the United States of America, I will say, is a great one. You know, my family came here running away from a civil war. I mean, there was literally bombs dropping in our front doorstep in Somalia. So coming here was an escape for us. We found a better life. I have 9 brothers and sisters. I have one older sister, about a year and a half older, and everybody else is younger. So we range from 34 to 19. So we're all doing well. We've all essentially are living the American dream. So I have nothing but good things to say about this country.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of Time Well Spent with Ronald, the podcast nobody asked for, yet somebody is listening to. I'm Ronald, aka OhitsBigRon. Let's get right to it. In my previous episode, I got a little political at the end, as I felt it was important for people to pay attention to politics in a turbulent time in this country. While I don't want this podcast to become a solely political podcast, I do want to talk a little bit about what happens when decisions are made that directly affect your neighbors, coworkers, and friends. At the top of the show, a friend of mine was speaking. However, I'll give him a chance to formally introduce himself now.
So my name is Ahmed, and I'm originally from Somalia. I'm a naturalized American citizen. I was born in Italy and immigrated to the United States in the 1980s.
Ahmed and I met on the campus of Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia in the fall of 2002. Go Rams. He, I, and about 9 to 11 others met our freshman year and would become the lifelong brotherhood that called ourselves Super Fresh. We have laughed together, cried together, and navigated the treacherous path from old teenagers to young adults. To this day, many of us keep regularly in touch. We play in a fantasy football league together. We have stood for one another at each other's weddings, witnessed one another having children, and have maintained a bond that basically began because we all happened to live in close proximity to each other when we started college. I've known Ahmed a long time, and I've known he's Somalian the entire time. However, I didn't make the connection that the immigration ban was directly affecting someone I knew until I happened to run into him getting coffee recently. I asked him his thoughts, and that's what led to this episode. I've always known Ahmed to be as American as I was. However, Ahmed and I's beginnings couldn't be more different. You've already heard he was escaping a civil war. However, moving here from a different country at a young age presented some challenges for him that he was able to overcome. Here's Ahmed addressing the transition of himself and his family into becoming U.S. citizens.
I had a couple of troubles when I first came to the United States. I mean, I was in the ESL, English as a Second Language program, for several years in elementary school. But for me and most of my siblings, it wasn't really that much of a struggle. And we were pretty young. I was about 4.5 years old when I came here. So I think English was fairly easy to pick up, but I have a lot of friends and family who came here when they were a lot older. So for them, I can see the struggle they're going to pick up a new language, just, how that's going for them. But I think growing up in the DMV area made it a lot easier for everybody involved. I think if we initially immigrated to the South, immigrated to the Midwest, or rural Virginia, I think the transition would not have been as easy.
Currently, Ahmed lives in the D.C. metropolitan area, which consists of Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, and a portion of Maryland. This area is very diverse, and while far from perfect, an ideal place for someone from a different culture to settle. People in this area tend to accept that most who settle here did not begin here. And whether it be from different parts of the U.S. to different parts of the world, the DMV, as it is affectionately called, was a good place for a young Somalian family to escape a war-torn country. As Ahmed said, we can only speculate to the success he would have had living in areas with people not used to seeing people different from themselves. In this next segment, Ahmed speaks directly about the immigration ban. You can probably tell that he's holding back a bit. Rightfully so, as the immigration ban directly affected him. As he continues, you will see that this ban is not just a bit of conversation in the news to him, but rather an executive action that ended up directly affecting him and his family.
So the immigration ban that Donald Trump recently imposed, I'll try to use words and not any expletives here, but I think it's disgusting. I think it's a red herring for what he wants to do and fulfill his political promises on the easiest targets that him and his administration looked at. If you look at the 7 countries that he banned, there were no attacks on Americans from any of those 7 countries using the refugee program. If you look at attacks that they cited in their executive order, things like 9/11, what all his talking heads are saying on TV, they're talking about San Bernardino, Orlando, they're talking about Fort Hood. All 3 of those were born in the United States of America. should not have been impacted by the ban. San Bernardino shooter's wife from Pakistan, also not part of the ban. So you see this pattern where, it appears that Trump administration went for the lowest hanging fruit, countries that are too poor to really do anything about it. But the countries that have actually had impacts, I guess, even if you look at it from the national security point of view, the Saudis with 9/11, Egypt, Pakistan, whatnot, and they're not on the ban list. So, it's very suspicious how the list came about. But again, nothing the Trump administration does makes any sense. And it's just checking a box to his followers on a campaign promise. Yep. So the ban personally affected me and my family. My sister and brother-in-law were in the process of sponsoring his mother and his sister to come over to the United States. So it's been a year-long process. They've been vetted, blood tests, relationships has been established, background checks. I mean, everything you can think of. Yep. So all visa programs from those 7 countries were halted immediately. In some cases, they were canceled, the visas. We're working with lawyers. There's a lot of free support out there right now, so which has been great, and trying to figure out where things are right now. So I think my sister in particular and my brother-in-law and the family, everyone's kind of shocked at the news and the ban and trying to figure out what's next, how long it's going to last, what the implications are. I mean, you're looking at this process for sponsoring and vetting. I mean, it takes, years, right? Especially from the 7 countries that were already cited. I mean, you get the argument saying there's no vetting from the Trump supporters, which is completely false. They've done a ton of vetting, and we're right there at the finish line. And then this happened. So, when you sponsor somebody to come over here, then you also are responsible for them financially. So a lot of these arguments that you see coming from Trump supporters, we can't afford folks, or they're not vetted, completely false. So also, I have other family living in Kenya who were born in Somalia but are Kenyan nationals, also cannot come over here. So the ban is a lot wider than people think. I think you're looking at, people who were born in Somalia but may have lived in Kenya their whole lives. But the fact they were born in Somalia, a lot of these immigration officials are assuming dual citizenship and are rejecting them. Today we had a case where Air France was flying a Somali Canadian, and he wasn't allowed on the plane, even though it was going from Canada to France, because it was flying over U.S. territorial waters. Mm-hmm. So I think the whole thing is getting ridiculous. And, I'm hopeful with the protests right now going on and the resistance that it'll be overturned shortly. One thing that makes me feel a little bit hopeful is that there's a lot of resistance right now coming from inside the government, outside the government, and across the world, including DHS and the State Department. So that gives me hope that, I think the people implementing the policies are pushing back.
The resistance Ahmed alludes to is the idea of never accepting a Trump presidency as normal. To hear Ahmed speak of a resistance spoke volumes, as the fate of Ahmed's family is contingent on this resistance being successful. One thing about the current political climate that has struck me as unusual is the tendency for some people to make an attempt to avoid getting involved in the political discussion altogether. Ahmed addresses this by mentioning that many people are in fact engaging politically when previously they would not have. And while this climate would have normally pushed him deeper into his political shell, he finds himself engaging more regularly now.
It was kind of a wake-up call, I think, to America. I mean, if you look at the demographics of America, voting patterns, it's a majority moderate to liberal country. The problem is the only people that vote are generally the older conservative population. So I've looked across, on the street in social media, looking outside just in the protests and the demonstrations, and just hearing people talk about the political situation right now. It's something I've never heard before. Me personally, I've always been very political. I knew what was going on, but it's also spurred me to be even more vocal about it. And this is why I'm giving a podcast right now, which is something I probably would not have done a couple of years ago. So I think, wherever you were on the spectrum of being, politically and consciously woke, you're being pushed now forward one way or another, whether you like it or not. So, as far as me and my, participation in the resistance here, I think I'm pushing for it a lot more than I ever have. Previously, I may have been, more silent, I guess, on Facebook. I may have donated financially here and there to certain causes that I believed in. Now, I'm looking more spiritually. I'm supporting causes financially. I'm out in D.C. There's protests almost every day. So after the airport ban, there was a bunch of folks on the National Mall. Mm-hmm. So I was out there for that, and I think it's just going to continue. You see a lot of folks on Facebook that are having countdowns to 2018, right? Mm-hmm. When's the last time we saw anybody in our age bracket interested in a midterm election off year, right?
Well, we got the gubernatorial election at the end of this year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, the whole house is going to be turned upside down. Everybody's seat is up, right? Yeah. And then, several Senate seats as well. So yeah, I think the movement and more people being involved and just getting the message out there. And believe me, come voting day in 2018, I mean, the way this is going, this is not getting out of the news. I mean, Trump can't help himself but constantly be in the forefront. I think it's going to be a devastating year for conservatives in 2018. So my final thoughts, I guess, will be just everyone keep your head up, not down. Get your head out of the sand, get out there. If you're not able to go out there, march, you're not able to go out protest, give whatever you can, provide whatever support you can for folks who are able to do that, and just vote. I mean, tell everybody that's the way we're going to do it. We're going to vote, so get involved.
I'll let Ahmed have the last word here. Vote. From the mouth of a Somalian refugee turned American citizen, get out there and make your voice known by voting. The election I mentioned in that segment is the Virginia gubernatorial election, which will take place in November of this year, 2017. As I stated in our previous episode, even if you can't find it within yourself to get involved, at the very least, just pay attention. Time Well Spent with Ronald is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Creative support from Michael Ulysses Jefferson. No help at all was provided by Noor Owis. There is a way to win $5 listening to this podcast simply by texting me the code word I mentioned after the credits. The only stipulation is, to win, you can't be related to me, and you have to already have my phone number. Theme music provided by royalty-free music from Ben Sound. Special thanks to Ahmed Muhammad, but not to Noor Owis. She did nothing. Time Well Spent will return next week. Thanks for listening. However, as Ahmed said, we can only speculate to the success he would have had adapting to the culture, living in other areas which were not equipped to handle come on, Ron, why did you write like this? However, as Ahmed said, we can only speculate as to the success he would have had adapting to... However, as Ahmed said, we can only speculate as to the success he would have had adapting to the culture, living in area... That is a run-on sentence, you idiot! Gosh!